Illuminate teens, got another lesson for you. We're going to be talking about how God redeems betrayal. God redeems betrayal in this passage in Genesis chapter 37. We'll see what happens with Joseph in his life and how favoritism and jealousy continue on through Jacob's family into the children. You know, the sins of the father often carry on to the children as well. And so they watch it and they tend to follow suit. But you know what? That isn't a guarantee. You don't have to make the same decisions and the same sins of those who have gone before you. You can learn from those and you can follow after God. But God redeems this betrayal just like he redeems a betrayal later on in the New Testament that we'll be talking about later. But we find here in the land of Canaan, Jacob's family, he has favoritism with Rachel over Leah and that whole crazy situation. But Rachel ends up having a son named Joseph. Now, again, Jacob is using favoritism and loves Joseph more than anybody else. And you find that in verse 3. Now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a coat of many colors. So he was actually giving something to Joseph that he would not give to the other children. And they recognized that. And that jealousy stirred up in them, and they become angry, they become frustrated, they become bitter. And there's a few things that happens in Joseph's life that he doesn't really help the situation out. Okay, so as he goes through, it says in verse 4, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. So there was consistent strife in their family. There was just no peace because of this jealousy. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaf stood round about, and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said unto him, Thou shalt indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And so he says, I have this dream. We're all gathering grain and bundling it up, and mine stood above the rest, stood above all of yours, and yours actually bowed down to mine. And what signified there is the fact that he would rule over them. He was higher up, and he said, really? You know, that's their response. Really? We're gonna bow down to you? That doesn't make any sense. And it only stirred up more strife. It didn't help it. It just fueled the fire. And then there's the second dream, starting in verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told it to his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow ourselves to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. Now, as you go on into this story and you find out more of what's going on, you find out that the hatred and the jealousy and it just keeps growing. The issues keep growing, and man, they're making evil plans about Joseph. Okay, even to the point of again. Coming up with a permanent solution for a temporary problem in their mind, a temporary issue. And that's what we need to be watching out for, that we don't make decisions for permanent stuff when it's just a temporary issue. In the sense of, you don't kill somebody just because you have a problem with them. You don't do that. That's not the answer. And you'll find it out later on in verse 18 through 28 of all of a sudden Joseph sent out, when his brothers are working and Joseph's not, he's sent out by his father to go check up on him as they're tending the sheep, and he goes out and they see him and they're trying to make a plan to actually kill him. And all of a sudden, before anything gets done, Reuben says, no, we're not going to kill him, we'll just toss him in this pit. Well, in the midst of it all, They end up seeing these slavers going to Egypt, and they sold their brother Joseph, took his cloak, took his robe, a coat of many colors that Jacob had Israel given to him, and they sold their brother to slavers going to Egypt for 20 pieces of silver. Again, a permanent solution. Was it really a solution for a temporary problem? And so here it is, you find a betrayal. Joseph's own brothers, Joseph's own family, actually casting him out and sending him away. And they don't know what's going to happen after that. They don't know what's going to go on. And yet that was their solution. So the sins keep rolling on. Now see, the temptation was there consistently for the brothers. Did they have to follow suit? No. They didn't have to give in to that. They could have let that go. For Joseph, the temptation was there continually to keep rubbing it in their faces. And yet, he fell for it. Every single time. He gave in. And he just gave a little bit more. Gave a little bit more. Fuel to the fire. See, we can help those situations by not falling into the temptation. We can say no to ourselves in a temporary exaltation of ourselves for the sake of peace with family. As we go into this, there's a lot of things to be thinking about. You know, and God's plan is always better, and yet sometimes we're envying other people's plans, or we're making up plans that don't add up with God's plan because we want the temporary satisfaction, the temporary exaltation. Like sin. Sometimes we fulfill our flesh in the midst of doing immoral things and giving into those temptations just because it satisfies you in the moment, even though God's called you to something different, into purity. And you could fill in the blanks. Maybe you've had that kind of struggle in your life and that kind of a temptation, but you don't have to fall for it. You can say no to yourself and be okay with God's plan. Be content because it's always better. Maybe you would like God's plan for somebody else rather than the plan that God set in place for you. Maybe you're never content where you are. Well, guess what? If you aren't content where you are, you'll never be content where you want to be. There's always going to be some sort of an issue, some greener grass on the other side that you're searching for when you finally get to where you want to be. You know, there's always something that you're going to want to buy, something that you're going to want to get. There's something that you're going to want to achieve. It's just that always searching because you're never content. Find your contentment with God. Find your contentment with what He provides rather than consistently falling for the temptation ahead. Okay? How have you seen God turn some pretty crazy situations around? Just like Joseph right here. Joseph's in a situation that it just doesn't seem like there's a way out. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. And yet, there is. There is. God makes a way, and He actually redeems this betrayal. And so as you're looking at this and you're trying to understand all that's ahead, think about that. He can redeem some pretty rough circumstances in your life. Okay? Just like Christ redeemed the betrayal, or God redeemed the betrayal of Christ. He was betrayed by one of His own. Judas, the one that he took around with him and asked them to follow him. And here he comes down to this point when he actually betrays Jesus with a kiss, and he sells him away, and he doesn't value Jesus like he should be valued, and yet he betrays him. And what does God do with it? He turns it around and offers salvation for all. Interesting thought process. I hope you enjoyed this lesson here today and something for you to be thinking about. Are you content in the situation that God has put you in and the plan that He has ahead for you? Are you saying no to these temptations that are coming up in your life? We'll talk to you later.